The old stagecoach came to a stop with a loud creak and a cloud of dust. Inside, Elena wiped her eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. Her hands shook as she smoothed down her blue traveling dress, the only nice thing she owned. The dress had belonged to her mother, and it was getting worn at the edges now. The driver called out, "Cedar Creek, Montana. End of the line." Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Through the small window she could see a tiny town with wooden buildings and dirt roads. Mountains rose up in the distance like giant sleeping creatures. Everything looked so different from back east. She had been traveling for 3 whole days. 3 days of bumpy roads, strange food, and sleeping in uncomfortable seats. But the worst part wasn't the hard journey. The worst part was not knowing what waited for her here. Elena picked up her old carpet bag. It held everything she owned in the world. 2 dresses, some underclothes, a brush, and the letters. Those precious letters from James Carter, the rancher who had agreed to marry her. She had read them so many times that the paper was soft from handling. His letters seemed kind. He wrote about his ranch, his horses, and how lonely life could be out here. He promised to take care of her and treat her well. But Elena had heard promises before. Men could write nice words, but that didn't mean they meant them. As she stepped down from the coach, her legs felt wobbly. The afternoon sun was bright, and she had to squint to see properly. The town was smaller than she had imagined. Just one main street with a few shops, a church, and what looked like a saloon. People moved slowly here, not like the rushing crowds back in Boston. Elena looked around nervously. Where was James? His last letter said he would meet the Tuesday coach. Today was Tuesday, wasn't it? She had lost track of the days during the long trip. A woman with gray hair came out of the general store and stared at her. 2 men sitting outside the saloon stopped talking and looked her way too. Elena felt like everyone could tell she didn't belong here. Her dress was too fancy for this place, and her pale skin showed she had never worked in the sun. The stagecoach driver pulled down her small trunk from the top of the coach. "This all you got, miss?" Elena nodded. It was embarrassing how little she had. Back home, other girls her age had hope chests full of linens and dishes for their future homes. Elena had almost nothing. "You waiting for someone?" the driver asked, looking around. Before Elena could answer, she heard the sound of a horse and wagon coming down the street. Her heart jumped. Was this him? Was this the man she was supposed to marry? The wagon stopped near the coach. Elena watched as a tall man climbed down. He was bigger than she had expected, with broad shoulders and hands that looked strong from hard work. His brown hair was a bit messy and his clothes were simple, just work pants and a clean shirt. He held his hat in his hands. This had to be James Carter. Elena's mouth went dry. He looked like he could easily overpower her if he wanted to. Just like, she pushed that thought away. She couldn't think about her stepfather now. She was here for a new start. The man walked toward her slowly like he didn't want to scare her. When he got closer, Elena could see his eyes were a warm brown color. He looked nervous too, which surprised her. "Miss Elena?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I'm James Carter. I hope the journey wasn't too hard on you." Elena tried to speak, but the words got stuck. All the fear and worry from the past week suddenly hit her at once. What was she doing here? She had traveled across the country to marry a complete stranger. What if he turned out to be cruel? What if he didn't like her? What if she had made a terrible mistake? The tears she had been holding back started falling again. She couldn't stop them, even though she knew crying made her look weak. Her stepfather had always said crying was stupid and useless. James just stood there for a moment, looking worried. Then he said something that shocked her. "You're safe now, miss. No more pretending you have to be someone you're not." Elena looked up at him through her tears. How did he know she had been pretending? In her letters, she had tried to sound strong and capable. She had written about being a good cook and housekeeper. Even though she had never really had the chance to learn properly, she had tried to sound like the perfect wife he would want. But now, standing here crying in front of the whole town, she couldn't pretend anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why I'm crying. No need to be sorry," James said gently. "You've come a long way. That takes courage." He didn't sound angry or disappointed. He didn't tell her to stop crying or say she was being foolish. He just waited patiently for her to calm down. The other people in town were still watching, but James didn't seem to care. He picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing and put it in his wagon. "Would you like to see your new home?" he asked. Elena wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. Yes, please. James helped her up onto the wagon seat. His touch was gentle, not rough like she had feared. As they started moving through town, Elena noticed that James waved to people they passed. An old man fixing a fence called out, "That your bride, James?" "Yes, sir," James called back. "This is Miss Elena." Elena felt her cheeks turn red. Everyone would know she was the mail-order bride. They would all be watching to see if the marriage worked out. As they left the town behind, Elena saw rolling hills covered with grass and wildflowers. The mountains looked even bigger now, purple in the afternoon light. It was beautiful but also wild and empty, so different from the crowded streets she was used to. "My ranch is about 20 minutes from town," James said. "It's not fancy, but it's peaceful," Elena nodded. She was still too nervous to say much. "I want you to know," James continued, "you don't have to decide anything right away. About marriage, I mean. You can take all the time you need to feel comfortable." This surprised Elena. Most men would expect to get married right away after going to all the trouble of bringing a bride out west, but we agreed. She started. "I know what the letters said," James replied, "but letters and real life are different things. I want you to be sure this is what you want." Elena looked at his profile as he drove the wagon. His face was kind, with small lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun. He didn't look like a man who would force her into anything. Maybe, just maybe, she really was safe now. As the wagon rolled toward her new life, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. A tiny bit of hope. She was still scared, still worried about what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time since leaving Boston, she thought maybe things might work out after all. The sun was getting lower in the sky, painting everything golden. Elena took a deep breath of the clean mountain air and tried to imagine what her life might be like here. Whatever happened, it had to be better than what she had left behind. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small hill. Elena had expected something rough and simple, but what she saw surprised her. The house was modest but well built, with a covered porch and flower boxes under the windows. Someone had taken care to make it look welcoming. James noticed her looking. "It's not much, but I try to keep it nice," he said. Elena could see a barn, a chicken coop, and a corral with several horses. Everything looked neat and organized. This wasn't the rough bachelor setup she had imagined. When James stopped the wagon near the front porch, Elena hesitated before getting down. This was really happening. She was about to enter the home of a man she had just met. James seemed to understand her nervousness. He climbed down first and then offered his hand to help her. When Elena flinched slightly at his outstretched hand, James immediately pulled back. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I should have asked first." Elena stared at him. No man had ever apologized to her for trying to help. Her stepfather would have gotten angry if she had pulled away from him. "It's all right," she said softly. I need a moment." James nodded and stepped back to give her space. He waited patiently while Elena gathered her courage and climbed down from the wagon by herself. As James carried her trunk toward the house, a golden dog came running from behind the barn. Elena tensed, but the dog just wagged its tail and went straight to James for pets. "This is Buddy," James said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "He's friendly, but I can keep him away if dogs make you nervous." "I like dogs," Elena said, surprised to find herself almost smiling. "We never had one, but I always wanted one." Buddy seemed to sense she was talking about him and walked over to her slowly, tail still wagging. When Elena reached out to pet him, his tail wagged even harder. "He likes you already," James said. "Buddy's a good judge of character." James opened the front door and gestured for Elena to go in first. The inside of the house was clean and comfortable. The main room had a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 4 chairs, and a rocking chair by the window. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with more books than Elena had expected to see in a cowboy's home. "The kitchen's through there," James said, pointing to a doorway. "And there are 2 bedrooms. You can have the bigger one." Elena turned to look at him. "Where will you sleep?" "The smaller room is fine for me," James said. "I want you to have your own space. And Elena," he paused, looking a bit embarrassed, "I want you to know that you don't have to worry about. What I'm trying to say is, I won't expect anything from you until you're ready. If you're ever ready." Elena felt her cheeks burn. She hadn't been sure what to expect about the physical side of marriage. Her stepfather's crude comments had made her fear the worst. "Thank you," she whispered. James showed her to the larger bedroom. It had a real bed with a nice quilt, a dresser with a mirror, and even curtains on the window. It was prettier than any room Elena had ever had. "I'll let you get settled," James said, setting her trunk down. "Take all the time you need. When you're ready, I'll show you around the ranch." After James left and closed the door, Elena sat on the bed and looked around. The room smelled like lavender and clean cotton. Someone had put fresh wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. Had James done that? The thought made her chest feel warm. Elena opened her trunk and carefully took out her few belongings. Her extra dress looked shabby next to the nice quilt. Her old brush seemed too worn to put on the pretty dresser. Everything she owned reminded her of how little she had to offer. There was a soft knock on the door. "Elena, I'm making some coffee. Would you like some?" Elena's stepfather had never asked what she wanted. He just told her what to do. This simple question felt strange and wonderful. "Yes, please," she called back. When Elena came out to the main room, James was pouring coffee into 2 cups. The smell filled the house and made it feel even more homey. "Cream and sugar?" James asked. "Just sugar if you have it," James smiled. "Lucky for you, I have a sweet tooth too." As they sat at the table drinking coffee, Elena noticed how James moved carefully around her, like he was trying not to startle her. When he reached for the sugar bowl, he moved slowly. When he passed her the cream, he set it down instead of handing it directly to her. "The coffee's very good," Elena said. "Thank you. I learned to make it strong when I was working cattle drives. You need something to keep you awake during night watch." Elena was curious about his past, but she wasn't sure if it was polite to ask questions. James seemed to sense her curiosity. "I worked for other ranchers for years before I could afford my own place. Saved every penny I could. This ranch isn't big, but it's mine. How long have you lived here?" 3 years now. It gets lonely sometimes, especially in winter. That's why I—" He stopped and looked embarrassed. "Why you decided to find a wife," Elena finished. "I hope that doesn't sound too practical," James said. "I mean, I hope for more than just company. I hope we might come to care for each other." Elena studied his face. He seemed sincere, but she had learned not to trust too quickly. After coffee, James showed her around the ranch. He introduced her to his horses, a big black stallion named Thunder, 2 work horses named Buck and Bell, and a gentle mare named Daisy. "Daisy's the calmest," James said. "If you want to learn to ride, she'd be perfect for you." Elena had never been on a horse, but the idea sounded exciting. In the chicken coop, James showed her his hens and explained how he collected eggs each morning. "They're good layers," he said proudly. "We usually have more eggs than I can eat." Elena noticed how gently James handled the chickens, even the ones that tried to peck at him. His big hands were surprisingly gentle. As they walked back toward the house, the sun was setting behind the mountains. The sky turned orange and pink, more beautiful than any sunset Elena had seen in the city. "It's so quiet here," she said. "Too quiet?" James asked, sounding worried. "No, it's nice. I like it." James smiled, and Elena realized she liked his smile. It made his whole face look kind. At dinner, James served simple food, beef stew and fresh bread. But it was well prepared and tasty. "Did you cook this?" Elena asked. "I had to learn when I started living alone," James said. "I'm not fancy, but I can manage the basics." Elena was impressed. Her stepfather had expected her mother to do all the cooking, even when she was sick. As they ate, James asked gentle questions about her journey and whether she was comfortable. He didn't pry into her past or ask why she had answered his advertisement. After dinner, James insisted on washing the dishes while Elena dried them. Working side by side felt natural even though they had just met. "Tomorrow I'll show you the rest of the ranch," James said. "But only if you want to. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do." That night, as Elena lay in her new bed listening to the sounds of the ranch, owls hooting, horses moving in the corral, the wind in the trees, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt safe. James Carter was nothing like what she had feared. He was gentle and patient and kind. Maybe, just maybe, she really could build a new life here. For the first time in months, Elena fell asleep without crying. Elena woke to the sound of birds singing outside her window. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered Montana, the ranch, James. She was really here. Sunlight streamed through the pretty curtains and she could smell coffee brewing. Elena dressed quickly in her second dress, the brown one that was more practical for ranch life. When she came out to the kitchen, James was already up and making breakfast. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" Elena nodded. She had slept better than she had in months, actually. "I hope you like eggs," James said. The hens were generous this morning. Breakfast was simple but good. Fresh eggs, bacon, and more of that wonderful coffee. James ate quickly like a man used to starting work early. "I need to check on the cattle this morning," he said. "You're welcome to come along or you can explore around the house. Whatever you prefer." Elna wasn't ready to ride a horse yet, so she decided to stay at the ranch. After James left, she found herself alone in the house for the first time. She wandered around slowly, looking at everything more carefully than she had the night before. The furniture was simple but well made. Everything was clean and organized. This was clearly the home of a man who took pride in his surroundings. But what caught Elena's attention most were the books. There were so many of them. Poetry books, adventure stories, even books about philosophy and science. Some looked new, others were worn from reading. Elena pulled one from the shelf, a book of poems by someone named Walt Whitman. She opened it carefully and saw notes written in the margins in James's handwriting. He had underlined certain passages and written thoughts about them. Elena stared in amazement. She had never known a man who read poetry, let alone one who thought about it deeply enough to write notes. Elena put the book back quickly when she heard Buddy barking outside. She didn't want James to catch her looking through his things. When James came back for lunch, his boots were muddy and his shirt was dusty, but he looked satisfied with his work. "How are the cattle?" Elena asked. "Doing well. We should have some calves born next month." James washed his hands and face at the kitchen basin. "What did you think of the house? Find everything you need?" Elena hesitated. Should she mention the books? "It's very nice, very clean." James laughed. "I guess I got in the habit of keeping things tidy when I was living alone. Some of the other ranchers think I'm too fussy." During lunch, Elena watched James carefully. He had good table manners and spoke properly, not like the rough cowboys she had imagined. When he reached for the salt, he said, "Excuse me," even though she wasn't in his way. After lunch, James said he needed to mend some fence. "Would you like to come along? I could show you more of the ranch." Elena agreed, curious to see how James worked. They walked to a pasture where some fence posts had come loose. Elena sat on a large rock and watched as James worked. He was strong. She could see the muscles in his arms as he lifted the heavy posts. But he worked carefully and methodically. "How did you learn to do all this?" Elena asked. "Trial and error mostly," James said, hammering a post into the ground, "and some good teachers along the way. Old Bill Thompson, who owned the ranch where I first worked, taught me a lot. He said a man should know how to fix anything that breaks on his own land." Elena found herself relaxing as she watched James work. There was something peaceful about the way he went about his tasks, not rushed or angry, just steady and sure. When a hammer slipped and James hit his thumb instead of the nail, Elena flinched and waited for him to curse or throw something. Her stepfather would have gone into a rage, but James just shook his hand and said, "Well, that was clumsy of me." Then he picked up the hammer and kept working. That evening, after another simple but good dinner, Elena helped James with the dishes again. She was starting to like this quiet routine. "I usually read for a while before bed," James said as they finished cleaning up. "You're welcome to join me, or if you prefer to rest." Elena was curious about James's reading, but she felt shy about admitting her own love of books. What if he thought it was strange for a woman to read so much? "I don't want to bother you," she said. "You wouldn't be bothering me at all," James said. "I have plenty of books if you'd like to look at them." Elena's heart jumped. "You wouldn't mind? Mind? I'd be delighted to share them with someone who appreciates reading." James led her to the bookshelf and started pulling out different volumes. "Do you like poetry? Adventure stories? I have some books about other countries and their customs." Elena could barely contain her excitement. "I love all kinds of books. Back home She stopped herself. She had been about to say too much. "You what?" James asked gently. Elena looked down at her hands. "I read whenever I could. Some people think it's a waste of time for women. Some people are wrong," James said firmly. "I think reading opens up the whole world." Makes you think about things in new ways. Elena looked up at him in surprise. You really think that? I know it, James said. Here, try this one. He handed her a book of adventure stories. This author writes about places I'll probably never see, but reading about them makes me feel like I've been there. That night, Elena sat in the rocking chair by the fireplace while James sat at the table, both of them reading. Every so often, one of them would share something interesting from their book. Elena felt more content than she had in years. When Elena went to bed, she found something that made her heart race. On her dresser, next to the jar of wildflowers, was a small book of poems with a piece of paper sticking out of it. Elena opened to the marked page and found a poem about courage and new beginnings. In the margin, James had written in his neat handwriting, "For someone brave enough to travel across the country for a new life." Elena sat on her bed holding the book, hardly able to believe what she was seeing. James had chosen this poem specifically for her. He saw her as brave when she felt so scared and uncertain. She read the poem 3 times before she fell asleep, the book still in her hands. The next morning, Elena found James in the kitchen earlier than usual. He looked nervous. Did you find the book I left?" he asked. Elena nodded, feeling shy. "Thank you. It was beautiful." James's face lit up. "I'm glad you liked it. I hoped you might enjoy poetry." From that day on, their evening routine expanded. After dinner and dishes, they would sit together and read. Sometimes they read silently. Sometimes James would read aloud from adventure stories, and sometimes Elena would share a poem that had moved her. Elena began to see sides of James she never could have imagined from his letters. He was thoughtful and curious about the world. He wondered about faraway places and different ways of living. He had dreams beyond just working his ranch. And slowly, Elena began to feel something growing in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude for James's kindness, though she felt that too. It wasn't just relief at being safe, though that was part of it. It was something warmer and more exciting, something that made her look forward to seeing James's smile each morning and hearing his thoughts about the books they shared. Elena was beginning to realize that she might actually be falling in love with her gentle cowboy, husband-to-be. But along with that warm feeling came a cold fear. What if James knew the whole truth about her past? What if he knew exactly why she had run away? Would he still be so kind and patient then? Elena pushed those worries aside for now. For the first time in her life, she was happy. She was going to enjoy it while it lasted. 2 weeks had passed since Elena's arrival at the ranch, and she found herself settling into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Each morning she helped James with breakfast, spent her days exploring the ranch or reading, and evenings were devoted to their shared love of books. But today felt different. Elena had woken up thinking about the letter she needed to write, to let people back east know she had arrived safely. The problem was there wasn't really anyone who cared enough to worry about her. Elena sat at the kitchen table with paper and ink, staring at the blank page. James had gone to town for supplies and wouldn't be back until evening. She had the whole day to herself, but instead of feeling free, she felt restless. The truth was weighing on her more each day. James was so kind, so genuine in his care for her. He deserved to know why she had really come west. It wasn't fair to let him think she was just a lonely woman seeking a husband when the reality was so much darker. Elena put down her pen and walked to the window. The mountains looked peaceful in the morning light, and she could see some of James's cattle grazing in the distance. This place felt like paradise compared to where she had come from. When James returned that afternoon, he seemed excited about something. He carried in several packages and set them on the table with a smile. "I hope you don't mind, but I picked up a few things I thought you might like," he said. Elena watched curiously as James unwrapped the packages. Inside were yards of pretty blue fabric, new thread, and even some lace trim. "For dresses," James explained, looking a bit embarrassed. "I noticed you only have the 2, and I thought you might like to make some new ones. Mrs. Peterson at the store helped me pick out the fabric." Elena stared at the beautiful material. It was finer than anything she had ever owned. "James, this is too much. I can't accept, please," James said quietly. "I want you to have nice things. You should have whatever makes you happy." The kindness in his voice broke something loose in Elena's chest. Here was this good man spending his hard-earned money on gifts for her, and he didn't even know who she really was. James, she said, her voice shaking slightly. There's something I need to tell you. James looked at her with concern. What is it? Are you unhappy here? No, Elena said quickly. It's not that. It's about why I answered your advertisement. About why I really came here. James set down the fabric and gave Elena his full attention. I'm listening. Elena's hands trembled as she tried to find the right words. In my letters, I told you I was alone and wanted a fresh start. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. She took a deep breath and continued. I didn't just want to come west, I had to. I was running away. James's expression didn't change. He just waited patiently for her to go on. My mother died when I was 16, Elena said. She had been sick for a long time. After she died, I had to live with my stepfather, Vincent Pike. Elena's voice grew quieter. He was not a good man. He drank a lot. And when he drank, he got angry about everything. He said women shouldn't read or write. He said it made them get ideas above their station. James's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. But I love to read, Elena continued. My mother had taught me before she got sick. I would hide books under my mattress and read by candlelight when Vincent was asleep. I taught myself to write by copying passages from books. Elena looked down at her hands. When Vincent found my books, he burned them. He said I was wasting time with nonsense when I should be learning to cook and clean. He hit me when he found me reading. James's hands clenched into fists, but his voice stayed gentle. He had no right to do that to you. It got worse after I turned 18, Elena said. Vincent said it was time for me to marry someone who would keep me in line. He had picked out a man, Harold Grimsby. Harold was almost 50 and mean as a snake. He had already buried 2 wives. Elena's voice broke a little. I knew if I married Harold, my life would be even worse than it was with Vincent. So I started planning to run away. How did you manage it? James asked. I saved every penny I could find, Elena said. Sometimes I would find coins that fell from Vincent's pockets when he was drunk. I sold my mother's jewelry bit by bit, and I saw your advertisement in a newspaper someone had left at the market. Elena finally looked up at James. Your letters sounded kind. You wrote about books and about treating people with respect. I thought maybe if I could get far enough away, I could have a different kind of life. James was quiet for a long moment. Elena's heart pounded as she waited for his response. Would he be angry that she had deceived him? Would he send her back? Elena, James said finally, thank you for telling me the truth. Elena blinked in surprise. You're not angry? Angry? James looked genuinely confused. Why would I be angry? You escaped from a bad situation and found the courage to start over. That takes incredible strength. But I lied to you in my letters, Elena said. I didn't tell you the real reason I wanted to come here. James shook his head. You didn't lie. You said you wanted a fresh start. And that's exactly what you were looking for. The details of why don't change anything. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Really? Really, James said firmly. And I want you to know you're safe here. Vincent Pike will never hurt you again. I promise you that. The certainty in James's voice made Elena believe him. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt truly safe. There's something else, Elena said hesitantly. I'm not very good at cooking or keeping house. Vincent never let me learn properly. He said I was too clumsy and stupid. James's eyes flashed with anger, but Elena could tell it wasn't directed at her. Vincent Pike was a fool, he said. And a cruel one. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met. I am? Elena, you taught yourself to write by copying from books. You memorized poems and stories. You planned and executed an escape across the entire country. If that's not intelligence, I don't know what is. Elena felt something warm spread through her chest. No one had ever called her smart before. Besides, James added with a small smile, I can cook and you're already better at keeping house than I am. We make a good team. That evening, as they sat reading together, Elena felt different, lighter. The secret she had been carrying was gone, and James's reaction had been better than she could have hoped. James, she said softly. Yes? Thank you for not sending me away. James looked up from his book with surprise. Elena, I would never send you away. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be. Even though I come with problems? Even though Vincent might try to find me? James set down his book completely and looked directly at her. Especially because of that. You didn't choose the problems in your past, but you chose to be brave enough to leave them behind. That makes you exactly the kind of person I want to share my life with. Elena felt her cheeks warm. You really mean that? I really mean that, James said. Elena, I need you to know something. When I first wrote that advertisement, I was just looking for a companion, someone to share the loneliness of ranch life. But getting to know you these past 2 weeks, well, I'm hoping for much more than just companionship now. Elena's heart started beating faster. What are you hoping for? James looked a bit nervous. I'm hoping that maybe in time we might come to love each other. Really love each other, not just marriage for convenience. Elena set down her own book and looked into James's kind brown eyes. I think, she said softly, that might be happening already. James's face lit up with the most beautiful smile Elena had ever seen. Really? Elena nodded, feeling brave. Really? That night, Elena went to bed feeling like a completely different person than the scared woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 2 weeks ago. She had told the truth about her past, and James had accepted her completely. More than that, he had made her feel valued and intelligent and worthy of love. For the first time in her life, Elena fell asleep feeling truly hopeful about the future. The next morning brought the first real test of the trust Elena and James had begun to build. Elena woke to the sound of thunder rumbling in the distance and felt her entire body go cold with fear. She had hoped the storms in Montana might be different from the ones back east, but as she looked out her bedroom window, she could see dark clouds gathering over the mountains. Lightning flickered in the distance. Elena's hands started shaking. She could hear Vincent's voice in her memory. Storm's coming, girl. Time for you to learn your place. When Elena came out to the kitchen, James was already making coffee, but he looked up with concern when he saw her face. Elena, what's wrong? Elena tried to speak normally, but her voice came out small and tight. There's a storm coming. James glanced toward the window where rain was just beginning to patter against the glass. Looks like it. We need the rain for the grass, though. It's been pretty dry lately. Elena nodded and tried to act normal, but her whole body felt tense. Every rumble of thunder made her flinch. During breakfast, James noticed Elena wasn't eating much. She kept glancing toward the windows and jumping slightly at each flash of lightning. Elena, James said gently, are you afraid of storms? Elena's first instinct was to deny it. Vincent had always said fear was weakness, and weak people deserved whatever happened to them. But James had been so understanding about everything else. Yes, she whispered. I know it's silly. It's not silly at all, James said immediately. Lots of people don't like storms. Is there something specific that worries you about them? Elena looked down at her hands. How could she explain about the cellar? About the hours spent in complete darkness listening to Vincent's angry footsteps above, about how he would leave her down there until the storm passed, sometimes for hours and hours. My stepfather used to, Elena started, then stopped. Even thinking about it made her feel sick. James waited patiently, not pushing her to continue. When storms came, Vincent would put me in the cellar, Elena said finally. He said it was for my own good to keep me safe. But really it was punishment. He would lock the door and leave me there alone in the dark until the storm was over. James's face went very still. He locked you in a cellar? During storms? Elena nodded. Sometimes for hours. The cellar was so dark and I could hear mice moving around. I never knew when he would come back to let me out. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Elena, that wasn't about keeping you safe. That was cruel punishment for no good reason. I know that now, Elena said. But at the time, well, it's hard not to feel scared when I hear thunder. The storm was getting closer now. Rain was hitting the windows harder, and the thunder was getting louder. Elena could feel her breathing getting faster. Would it help if we stayed together during the storm? James asked. I could read aloud or we could talk or whatever would make you feel better. Elena looked at him with surprise. You don't mind? Mind? Elena, I want you to feel safe here. If staying together during storms helps, then that's what we'll do. When the storm hit in full force an hour later, Elena and James were sitting together on the sofa near the fireplace. James had built up a good fire, and the crackling logs helped mask some of the thunder sounds. James had chosen a funny adventure story to read aloud, something light that might distract Elena from the storm. His voice was calm and steady, and Elena found herself focusing on the story instead of the noise outside. But when a particularly loud crack of thunder shook the house, Elena couldn't help but gasp and shrink back into the sofa cushions. Without thinking, James reached out to comfort her, then caught himself and pulled his hand back. "I'm sorry. I should have asked before." "It's okay," Elena said quickly. I think I would like that, if you don't mind." James carefully put his arm around Elena's shoulders, giving her a gentle, protective feeling instead of the trapped feeling she had always associated with men's touches. Elena found herself leaning into his warmth. "You're safe," James said quietly. "I'm right here and nothing bad is going to happen to you." Elena believed him. For the first time in her life during a thunderstorm, she felt protected instead of terrified. As James continued reading, Elena gradually relaxed. The story was about a brave woman who had all sorts of adventures in faraway places. Elena found herself imagining what it would be like to be that fearless. "Do you think people can really change?" Elena asked during a quiet moment between thunder rumbles. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if someone has always been afraid of something, can they learn not to be afraid anymore?" James considered this seriously. "I think people can learn to be braver," he said. "Maybe the fear doesn't completely go away, but it doesn't have to control your life." "How do you learn to be braver?" "Practice, I guess. Small steps, and having people around you who make you feel safe enough to try." Elena looked up at James. "Do you think I could learn to be braver?" "Elena, you're already one of the bravest people I know. You left everything familiar and traveled across the country by yourself. That took incredible courage." "I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified." "Being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared," James said. "It means feeling scared and doing what you need to do anyway." The storm continued for another hour, but Elena hardly noticed. She was too busy thinking about what James had said about courage and feeling safe with his arm around her, and his voice reading stories of adventure. When the storm finally passed, Elena realized she had made it through without having a single panic attack. She had still been afraid, but she hadn't felt helpless. "Thank you," she told James as they watched the sun break through the clouds. "For what?" "For staying with me. For making me feel safe." James squeezed her hand gently. "Always, Elena. You never have to face anything alone anymore." Over the next few days, James seemed to make a special effort to help Elena build confidence in small ways. He taught her to ride Daisy, the gentle mare, starting with just sitting on the horse while James held the reins. "You're a natural," James said as Elena managed to ride Daisy around the corral by herself. "Look how comfortable you are up there." Elena felt proud and accomplished. She had never imagined she could learn to ride a horse. James also started teaching Elena more about running the ranch. He showed her how to collect eggs from the chickens, how to milk the cow, and how to tend the vegetable garden behind the house. "You have gentle hands," James observed as Elena successfully got milk from Bessie the cow. Animals can tell when someone has a kind heart. Every compliment, every small success, helped Elena feel more capable and confident. But the biggest change came one evening when Elena was looking through James's books and found one she had never seen before. It was a journal with blank pages. "What's this for?" Elena asked. James looked a bit embarrassed. "I bought it for you in town. I thought maybe you might like to write down your own thoughts sometimes. I know how much you love reading, and I wondered if you might enjoy writing too." Elena stared at the beautiful journal with its leather cover and clean white pages. "You want me to write?" "Only if you want to," James said quickly. "I just thought, well, you have such interesting ideas about the books we read. I thought you might have stories or thoughts of your own to write down." That night, Elena sat at the kitchen table with the journal open in front of her. She had never thought about writing her own words instead of just copying other people's. She started slowly, writing about her first impressions of Montana, about learning to ride Daisy, about how different James was from what she had expected. As she wrote, Elena discovered she enjoyed putting her thoughts into words. Writing in the journal became part of Elena's daily routine. Sometimes she wrote about ranch life, sometimes about books she had read, and sometimes about her growing feelings for James. One evening, James found Elena writing by lamplight and smiled. "How's the writing going?" "I love it," Elena said honestly. "It helps me understand my own thoughts better." "Would you ever want to share anything you've written?" James asked. "I'd love to read your thoughts, but only if you want to share them." Elena felt nervous but also excited. "Maybe someday, when I feel brave enough." "There's no rush," James said. "Take all the time you need." As Elena got ready for bed that night, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. She was learning new skills, building confidence, and discovering parts of herself she had never known existed. Most importantly, she was learning what it felt like to be truly cared for by someone who wanted her to be happy and successful. Elena was beginning to understand that love wasn't about one person controlling another. It was about two people helping each other become the best versions of themselves. And for the first time in her life, Elena was excited to see what kind of person she might become. 3 weeks had passed since the thunderstorm, and Elena was beginning to feel like she truly belonged at the ranch. She could now ride Daisy confidently around the property, had learned to make James's favorite biscuits, and was writing in her journal every evening. The morning started like any other. Elena was feeding the chickens while James repaired a broken gate in the near pasture. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and the mountains were beginning to show touches of gold and red on their slopes. Elena was laughing at one of the hens who kept trying to steal food from the others when she heard the sound of horses approaching. Visitors were rare at the ranch, so Elena looked up curiously to see who might be coming. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized the two men riding up the path. Vincent Pike sat tall on a big black horse, looking exactly as Elena remembered, heavy-set, with mean eyes and a mouth that always seemed to be frowning. Beside him rode a thin man Elena didn't recognize, but who had the look of someone hired to do unpleasant work. Elena dropped the chicken feed and ran toward the house, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. This couldn't be happening. Vincent couldn't have found her. She was supposed to be safe here. Elena. Vincent's voice boomed across the yard. Elena Pike. Get out here now. Elena made it to the porch before her legs gave out. She grabbed the railing to keep from falling, her whole body shaking with terror. James appeared from behind the barn, drawn by the commotion. When he saw Elena's face, his expression immediately grew concerned. Elena? What's wrong? Vincent dismounted his horse and strode toward the house like he owned it. You the man who's been harboring my stepdaughter? James moved to stand between Vincent and Elena, his body tense but his voice controlled. I'm James Carter. This is my ranch. Vincent Pike, the older man said, not offering his hand. And that girl cowering on your porch belongs to me. I've come to take her home. No, Elena whispered, but her voice was too quiet for anyone but James to hear. James looked back at Elena, then stepped closer to Vincent. Elena is a grown woman. She makes her own choices about where she lives. Vincent laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Is that what she told you? Elena's not capable of making choices for herself. Never has been. Girl's always been simple-minded and stubborn. Elena flinched at the familiar insults. For a moment, she almost believed them again. That's not true, James said firmly. Elena is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Vincent's eyes narrowed. She's got you fooled, hasn't she? Let me guess. She told you some sob story about needing a fresh start. Probably didn't mention that she stole money from me before she ran off. Elena's heart sank. She had taken money from Vincent, coins she found and small amounts she had saved, but she had needed it to escape. Would James believe Vincent's version of events? Even if that were true, James said, it wouldn't give you the right to force her to go anywhere. The law says different, Vincent said with a cruel smile. Elena's not married, which means her family has legal authority over her. And I'm her only family. The thin man who had come with Vincent spoke up for the first time. I'm Detective Morrison from Boston. Mr. Pike hired me to track down his stepdaughter. We have every right to bring her back. Elena felt the world spinning around her. A detective. Vincent had hired a real detective to find her. All her hopes for freedom were crumbling. Elena, James said without turning around. Is any of this true? Did you take money that wasn't yours? Elena's voice came out as barely a whisper. I took some coins, but they were just lying around and I needed them to buy my train ticket. I wasn't trying to steal, Vincent snorted. There you have it, theft. Plus she owes money for her keep all these years. I fed and housed that girl for years after her mother died. She owes me plenty. James's jaw was tight with anger, but he kept his voice level. What do you want? I want my stepdaughter back where she belongs, Vincent said. She's got a wedding to attend. Harold Grimsby's been waiting patiently for his bride. Elena made a small sound of distress. Harold Grimsby, the cruel man Vincent had chosen for her to marry. The thought of marrying him was almost worse than going back to Vincent. "And what if Elena doesn't want to go?" James asked. Vincent's smile turned ugly. "Doesn't matter what she wants. Like I said, the law's on my side. Detective Morrison here can explain it to you if you're too stupid to understand." Morrison stepped forward, pulling out some official-looking papers. "These documents give Mr. Pike legal authority to retrieve his stepdaughter. If you interfere, you could be charged with kidnapping." Elena watched James's face as he looked over the papers. She could see him thinking, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. "The papers look real enough," Morrison continued. "You seem like a decent man, Mr. Carter. Don't ruin your life over a girl who's not worth the trouble." "Elena is worth any amount of trouble," James said firmly. Elena felt a warm burst of gratitude, even in the middle of her terror. James was trying to protect her even against legal documents and threats. But Vincent was getting impatient. "Enough talk. Elena, get your things. We're leaving now." "No," Elena said, finding her voice at last. "I won't go with you." Vincent's face darkened. "You'll do what you're told, girl. Just like always." He started toward the porch, but James moved to block his way again. "She said no," James said quietly. "That's the end of it." Vincent looked like he was about to explode with rage. "You think you can stop me? I'll have the sheriff here within the hour. You'll be in jail, and Elena will be on her way back to Boston whether she likes it or not." Elena realized with growing horror that Vincent might be right. These papers looked official, and Morrison really was a detective. James could get in serious trouble for trying to help her. "James," Elena said quietly, "maybe I should go." James turned to look at her with surprise. "What, Elena? No." "I don't want you to get hurt because of me," Elena said, tears starting to fall. "If Vincent has legal papers—" "I don't care about legal papers," James said. "I care about what's right. And it's not right for anyone to force you into a life you don't want." Vincent saw his chance. "Listen to your woman, Carter. She knows where she belongs." Elena looked at James's determined face, then at Vincent's smug expression. She thought about Harold Grimsby and the life of misery that awaited her back east. She thought about the journal James had given her, the books they read together, the way he made her feel safe and valued. Then she thought about the danger James was putting himself in for her sake. Elena made the hardest decision of her life. "I'll go," she said quietly. Just let me get my things." "Elena, no," James said urgently. "We can fight this. We can find another way." But Elena was already walking toward the house. If she had to sacrifice her happiness to keep James safe, that's what she would do. He had given her a glimpse of what love could be like, and that was more than she had ever expected to have. Vincent smiled triumphantly. "Smart girl. For once in your life, you're doing the right thing." As Elena packed her few belongings with shaking hands, she could hear James outside trying to reason with Vincent and Morrison. But she knew it was useless. Vincent always got what he wanted in the end. Elena wrote a quick letter to James trying to explain why she had to leave and thanking him for showing her what kindness looked like. She left it on the dresser next to the journal he had given her. When she came back outside, Vincent was already mounting his horse. "Come on, girl. We've got a long ride back to town to catch the evening train." Elena looked at James one last time, memorizing his kind face and gentle eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." James caught her hand as she walked past. "This isn't over, Elena. I promise you this isn't over." Vincent kicked his horse forward impatiently. "It's over, Carter. Stay away from what doesn't belong to you." As Elena climbed onto the spare horse Vincent had brought, she felt like her heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. She had found love and safety, and now she was giving it up to protect the man who had given her those gifts. But as they rode away from the ranch, Elena caught a glimpse of James's face. He didn't look defeated. He looked determined. Maybe, just maybe, this really wasn't over yet. James stood in his empty house, holding Elena's letter in his hands and feeling angrier than he had ever felt in his life. Not angry at Elena. Angry at the system that allowed men like Vincent Pike to control and terrorize women in the name of law and family. The letter was heartbreaking in its selflessness. Elena had written about how grateful she was for the kindness he had shown her, how she had never known what it felt like to be truly safe until she came to his ranch. She had written about loving him too much to let him risk his freedom for her sake. "Like hell," James muttered, crumpling the letter and then immediately smoothing it out again. He couldn't bear to damage anything Elena had touched. James saddled Thunder, his fastest horse, and rode hard toward town. He had maybe an hour before the evening train left for the east. 1 hour to figure out how to save the woman he loved from a life of misery. When James reached Cedar Creek, he could see Vincent's horses tied up outside the saloon. Of course, Vincent would stop for drinks before catching the train. The man had always been a drunk, according to Elena's stories. James pushed through the saloon doors and immediately spotted Vincent at the bar, bourbon in hand, talking loudly to anyone who would listen. Ungrateful girl never knew how good she had it, Vincent was saying. Fed her, clothed her, kept a roof over her head for years. This is how she repays me, running off like a common thief. Several of the local men were listening, but James could see they weren't impressed with Vincent's story. Most of them knew James and respected him. "Where's Elena?" James demanded. Vincent turned around with a smug smile. "Elena's locked up safe in the hotel room until train time. Don't want her getting any more foolish ideas about running off." "You locked her in a room?" James's voice was dangerously quiet. "Damn right I did. Girl can't be trusted on her own." Vincent took another drink. "You really thought you could steal another man's property, Carter?" "Elena isn't property," James said firmly. "She's a human being with the right to make her own choices." Vincent laughed. "Human being? Elena's barely smart enough to dress herself. Always been simple, that one. Probably told you all sorts of lies about me being mean to her." James looked around the saloon. Several townspeople had gathered to listen, including Sheriff Williams, Doc Peterson, and Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store. "Actually," James said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Elena told me quite a lot about you, Vincent Pike." Vincent's smile faltered slightly. "Whatever she said, she was lying. Girl's always been a liar. She told me how you burned her books because you said reading was above her station," James continued. "She told me how you locked her in a cellar during thunderstorms as punishment for learning to write." Vincent's face was turning red. "Sometimes children need discipline." "She's not a child," James interrupted. "She's a grown woman. And she told me about Harold Grimsby, the man you want to force her to marry. 50 years old, already buried 2 wives, known for his cruel temper. Harold's a good man with money and land," Vincent blustered. "Elena should be grateful someone decent is willing to take her." Doc Peterson spoke up from the corner. "Harold Grimsby isn't decent. I treated both his wives before they died. They always had mysterious bruises and broken bones." Vincent whirled around. "You stay out of this, old man. This is family business." "Is it family business to lock a woman in a room against her will?" Sheriff Williams asked, stepping forward. "Because that sounds more like kidnapping to me." Vincent's face was getting darker. "I have legal papers. That detective can show you." "Speaking of Detective Morrison," James said, "where is he now?" Vincent looked around nervously. He had other business to attend to. James had suspected as much. "Let me guess. He took his payment and disappeared as soon as he got you to town, probably on the first stage back to wherever he came from." That's not," Vincent stammered. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward. "I saw that so-called detective buying a ticket on the noon stage to Denver. Left hours ago." Vincent's mouth opened and closed like a fish. James could see the man's story falling apart. "And those legal papers?" Sheriff Williams said. "I'd like to take a look at them." Vincent's hand went protectively to his coat pocket. They're in order. All signed and official." "Then you won't mind if I examine them," the sheriff said, holding out his hand. Vincent reluctantly pulled out the papers and handed them over. Sheriff Williams studied them carefully, frowning. "These papers claim legal guardianship over Elena Pike," the sheriff said finally. "But Elena's last name isn't Pike, is it?" "It's her mother's name, Moreau. She only lived with you after her mother died." Vincent's face went pale. I raised her. "And she's 21 years old," the sheriff continued. "Well past the age where anyone can claim guardianship over her." "These papers are worthless." James felt a surge of hope. "So Elena is free to make her own choices?" "Absolutely," Sheriff Williams said. "And if she chooses to stay in Montana with you, that's her legal right." Vincent looked around the saloon desperately. Every face was against him now. But she stole from me." "A few coins to buy a train ticket," James said. "Hardly grand theft." "I want her arrested for theft," Vincent shouted. Doc Peterson laughed. Vincent, you'd have to prove she stole something of significant value. And you'd have to explain to a judge why a grown woman needed to steal pocket change to escape from your house. Vincent was starting to look panicked. His whole plan was crumbling around him. Besides, Sheriff Williams added, I've been asking around about you, Pike. Seems you have some gambling debts back in Boston. Word is you owe some dangerous men quite a bit of money. Vincent's face went white. That's not... And Harold Grimsby, the sheriff continued. He wouldn't happen to be one of your creditors, would he? Maybe he agreed to forgive your debts in exchange for a young wife. The silence in the saloon was deafening. James felt sick as he realized the full scope of Vincent's plan. Elena wasn't just being forced into an unwanted marriage. She was being sold to pay off her stepfather's gambling debts. You're pathetic, James said quietly. You were willing to sell Elena to a brute to cover your own mistakes. Vincent's face twisted with rage. You don't know anything about it. Elena owes me. I fed her and housed her. After her mother died and left you her house and belongings, Doc Peterson interrupted. Elena didn't owe you anything. If anything, you owed her. Vincent looked around the room one more time, seeing nothing but hostile faces. His shoulders sagged as he realized he had lost. Fine, he said bitterly. Keep the ungrateful girl. See how you like dealing with her when she shows her true colors. I've seen Elena's true colors, James said firmly. She's brave, intelligent, kind, and loyal. Everything you're not. Vincent downed the rest of his bourbon and headed for the door. This isn't over, he muttered. Sheriff Williams stepped into his path. Actually, it is over. You're going to get on that train and go back to Boston. And if you ever come back here bothering Elena, I'll arrest you for harassment. Vincent glared at the sheriff, but he didn't argue. He pushed through the saloon doors and disappeared into the street. James turned to Sheriff Williams. Can you help me get Elena out of that hotel room? With pleasure, the sheriff said. Mrs. Henderson, you mind coming along? Elena might feel more comfortable with another woman present. The three of them walked quickly to the hotel. The clerk was happy to hand over the key when Sheriff Williams explained the situation. James knocked gently on the door. Elena, it's James, you're safe now. There was a moment of silence, then Elena's voice shaky with hope. James, is it really you? It's really me. Vincent's gone. You're free, Elena. James heard the sound of running footsteps. Then Elena was in his arms, crying with relief and joy. I thought I'd lost you forever. She sobbed against his chest. Never, James said firmly, holding her tight. I told you this wasn't over. I meant it. Elena pulled back to look at his face. But the papers. The detective, all fake, James said. Vincent was trying to sell you to Harold Grimsby to pay off his gambling debts. But you're free now. Completely free to choose your own life. Elena's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were tears of happiness. And I choose you, she whispered. If you'll have me. James smiled and gently wiped away her tears. Elena Moreau, I love you more than life itself. Will you marry me? For real this time, because we want to, not because we have to. Yes, Elena said, laughing through her tears. Yes, yes, yes. As James kissed his brave, beautiful bride-to-be, he knew that no legal papers or cruel stepfathers would ever separate them again. Elena was finally truly free. 6 months later, Elena stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the simple white dress she had sewn herself for her wedding day. The fabric was the beautiful blue material James had bought for her, but she had dyed it white using a technique Mrs. Henderson had taught her. It was early morning, and golden sunlight streamed through the windows of the ranch house. Today was the day she and James would finally be married, not out of convenience or necessity, but out of pure love. Elena smiled at her reflection. She looked different than she had when she first arrived in Montana. Her skin was healthier from outdoor work and good food. Her eyes were brighter and held no fear. She had grown her hair longer, and it fell in soft waves around her shoulders. But the biggest change was in her confidence. Elena no longer hunched her shoulders or looked at the ground when she walked. She stood straight and met people's eyes when she spoke. She had learned that her opinions mattered and that her thoughts were worth sharing. There was a gentle knock on her door. Elena, are you ready? It was Mrs. Henderson, who had become like a mother to Elena over the past months. Almost, Elena called back. She picked up the small bouquet she had made from wildflowers and the leather journal James had given her. She had filled almost every page with her thoughts, poems, and stories about their life together. When Elena opened the door, Mrs. Henderson gasped. "Oh, my dear, you look absolutely beautiful." "Thank you for helping me get ready," Elena said, giving the older woman a hug. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Mrs. Henderson had taken Elena under her wing after Vincent's departure, teaching her all the things about running a household that Elena had never learned. But more than that, she had become the loving female presence Elena had missed since her mother's death. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "You've become such a strong, confident woman." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. She had learned to think of her mother's memory with joy instead of sadness. The wedding was to take place in the meadow behind the ranch house, the same meadow where James had first taught Elena to ride Daisy. Pastor Williams from the town church would perform the ceremony, and most of the townspeople would be there to celebrate. As Elena and Mrs. Henderson walked toward the meadow, Elena could see the guests gathering. There weren't many, but each person there had become important to Elena's new life. Doc Peterson was there with his wife, the couple who had first welcomed Elena to their church. Sheriff Williams and his family had come to celebrate. Even old Bill Thompson, James's former boss, had traveled from the next county to attend. But most importantly, James was there. Elena's breath caught when she saw him standing under the arch of wildflowers that the townswomen had built. He wore his best suit, and his hair was neatly combed, but his eyes were the same warm brown that had first made Elena feel safe. James's face lit up when he saw Elena walking toward him. The look of pure love and admiration in his eyes made Elena feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. Pastor Williams began the ceremony with a prayer, thanking God for bringing two people together across such a great distance. But Elena barely heard the traditional words. She was too focused on James's face and the promises they were about to make to each other. "James," Pastor Williams said, "do you take Elena to be your wife, to love and cherish her, to protect and honor her, for as long as you both live?" "I do," James said firmly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "I promise to love Elena exactly as she is, to support her dreams, and to never try to change her into someone she's not." Elena felt her heart swell. Those weren't the traditional wedding vows, but they were perfect for them. "Elena," Pastor Williams continued, "do you take James to be your husband, to love and honor him, to stand by his side, for as long as you both live?" Elena's voice was clear and strong when she answered, "I do. I promise to love James with my whole heart, to be his partner in all things, and to never pretend to be anything other than who I truly am." When they exchanged rings, simple gold bands that James had ordered from back east, Elena thought about how different this moment was from what Vincent had planned for her. Instead of being forced into marriage with a cruel stranger, she was choosing to marry her best friend and the love of her life. "You may kiss your bride," Pastor Williams announced with a smile. James's kiss was gentle and full of promise. When they broke apart, the small crowd of guests erupted in cheers and applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Williams called out, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. James Carter." As they walked back toward the house for the celebration dinner, James took Elena's hand. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Carter?" Elena squeezed his hand. "It feels like coming home." The reception was simple but joyful. Mrs. Henderson and the other town ladies had prepared a feast of roasted chicken, fresh vegetables from various gardens, and 3 different kinds of pie. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing in the yard as the sun set behind the mountains. Elena found herself laughing and talking easily with the guests. These people had become her community, her chosen family. They had welcomed her without question and supported her when she needed help. Doc Peterson pulled Elena aside during the dancing. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly. "I got a letter from a colleague in Boston. Vincent Pike was arrested for fraud last month. Seems he'd been forging documents and cheating people out of money for years. He won't be bothering you again." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had always worried that Vincent might come back someday. "Thank you for telling me." "You're safe now, Elena, completely safe. You can stop looking over your shoulder." As the evening wound down and the guests began to head home, Elena and James stood on their porch, watching the stars come out. The mountains were dark silhouettes against the sky, and the air was crisp with the promise of autumn. "Do Do you ever miss Boston? James asked, putting his arm around Elena's shoulders. Elena considered the question seriously. I miss my mother sometimes, and I miss some of the bookshops and libraries, but I don't miss the life I had there. That wasn't really living, it was just surviving. James nodded thoughtfully. What about now? Do you feel like you're really living? Elena smiled and turned to face him. Now I feel like I'm finally the person I was meant to be. For the first time in my life, I don't have to pretend to be smaller or quieter or less intelligent than I am. You never have to pretend anything with me, James said softly. I fell in love with exactly who you are. Elena reached up and touched James's face gently. Do you know what the best part is? I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid of storms or of speaking my mind or of taking up space in the world. What changed? James asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. You showed me what love really looks like, Elena said. Real love doesn't try to control or diminish the other person. It helps them grow and become their best self. James kissed her forehead tenderly. You taught me the same thing. Before you came here, I thought I was just looking for someone to share my life with. I didn't realize I was looking for someone to help me become a better man. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, holding each other and listening to the peaceful sounds of their ranch. The gentle lowing of cattle in the distance, the rustle of wind through the trees, the soft nicker of horses in the corral. James, Elena said eventually. Yes? I've been thinking about something. You know how I love to write in my journal? Of course. Some of your stories are better than the books we buy from back east. Elena blushed at the compliment. Well, I was wondering, do you think other women might want to read stories about finding courage and starting over? Maybe women in situations like mine was. James's eyes lit up with excitement. Elena, that's a wonderful idea. You could write stories that give other women hope. You really think so? You don't think it's too ambitious for someone like me? James took Elena's hands in both of his. Listen to me carefully. There is no limit to what someone like you can accomplish. You're intelligent, creative, and brave. If you want to write stories for other women, then that's exactly what you should do. Elena felt a thrill of possibility run through her. I could write about mail-order brides who find real love, about women who escape bad situations and build new lives, about finding the courage to be yourself. And I'll support you in every way I can, James promised. We can order more books from back east for research. We can find ways to get your stories published. Whatever you need. Elena threw her arms around James's neck and hugged him tightly. 6 months ago, she never could have imagined having dreams this big, or having someone who believed in those dreams as much as she did. I love you. James Carter, she whispered against his ear. I love you too. Elena Carter, he whispered back. As they went inside their house together, their house, their home, their future, Elena reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. She had started as a frightened young woman fleeing an impossible situation. She was ending the day as a confident wife with dreams and plans and unlimited possibilities ahead of her. The scared girl who had stepped off that stagecoach 6 months ago was still part of her. But she was no longer in control. Elena had learned that courage wasn't about not being afraid.